Hello everybody, and welcome to Ancient Architects. Please subscribe now to get the latest ancient history news and independent research from around the world. When we look at the history of Göbekli Tepe, it's easy to focus on the structures, the pillars and the symbolism, and we sometimes forget that this was the work of people. Real people emerging from the harsh conditions of the Younger Dryas to try and build a life in the hills of southeastern Anatolia. These people established a social structure, they had a way of life, a belief system, and they had skills. They could carve tools, weapons and vessels from stone. They could quarry large pillars and erect structures that stood for several hundred years. They etched intricate relief carvings onto the T-shaped pillars and created sculptures depicting people and animals in very specific ways. These people had a culture, and we see this in many ways. Through excavations of places like Kortik Tepe, Göbekli Tepe, Karahan Tepe, Sayburc and so on. It often goes unmentioned, but the remains of the people who lived at Göbekli Tepe have also been discovered, and these also show unique characteristics of a long-forgotten culture. Dozens of fragments of human skulls have been recovered from excavations, but the remains of 3 skulls in particular have intentional deep incisions along their sagittal axes. We also see an example of a drilled perforation, and all of these marks were done after the people had died. So we have evidence that the people of Göbekli Tepe modified the human skull after a person's death. We don't know if this was done for every deceased person or just a select few, whether these people were friends or foes, but together with the motifs on the T-shaped pillars, and as well as the numerous statues recovered, we are building an image of the practices, customs and belief systems of the pre-pottery Neolithic people. Of course, at the present time, we don't know what it all means with any certainty, but we can all look at the archaeological finds, we can all read the analysis, and we can compare relics to the other sites in the region, and even to later cultures. But then it comes down to interpretation, which is difficult without a complete picture. So, with that in mind, in this video I'm taking a look at the skull modifications of Göbekli Tepe, to see what we can learn about the truly ancient people that lived there. More than 600 fragmented human bones have been discovered at Göbekli Tepe, and the majority are skull fragments. 10% of these fragments, which is around 40, have cut marks, which look to be from defleshing. Cut marks on some cervical vertebrae also show evidence of decapitation. 7 skull fragments show evidence of very specific modifications, which are not thought to be related to defleshing, and these fragments come from 3 individuals. It's hard to tell if they're from men or women, but one looks to be more female than male. All 3 are adults, and on their death, it's estimated they're between 20 and 50 years of age. A National Geographic article from 2017 said the skull fragments date between 10,000 and 7,000 years ago, which, if true, would post-date the lifespan of Göbekli Tepe. But this is simply a mistake by the writer. They were meant to write between 10,000 and 7,000 BC, not years ago, the time of the pre-pottery Neolithic. The bone fragments certainly do date to the time when Göbekli Tepe was in full use. On one of the fragments we find an example of a drilled perforation, others show deep cuts and application of colour from ochre. At Göbekli Tepe, the skull clearly had some kind of significance after death. This diagram shows the skull fragments in grey, and the positions of the cuts and the drill hole in red. Looking at the fragments under a microscope, and we know the modifications were done with lithic tools, and the depth of carvings and multiple cutting actions differentiate the markings from those associated with defleshing, cleaning and so on. There are shallower cut marks as well, running parallel to the deeper ones, and these have been interpreted as errors, after the flint blade clearly slipped from the intended direction of carving. We know the drill hole and the cuts were done after death, as there is no sign of healing, and it is thought the work was done shortly after the people died. The sharp edges of the cuts show the work was done when the bone was still elastic, meaning it was in a very early stage of decay. The drill hole is funnel shaped, showing it was done from the outside in. The external width of the hole is 6.7mm and the internal is 5mm, and it was created using lithics. So, that's a brief description of the skull modifications we find at Göbekli Tepe. But what can we learn from this? Well, the discussion in the paper is the longest part because the information does lead to a number of possible interpretations and correlations. First of all, we do find post-mortem skull modifications at different sites in Neolithic Anatolia and the Levant, and these could well be a regular part of burial customs. Of course, at Göbekli Tepe, we only find evidence on 3 skulls, but these skulls are 15% of all the adult individuals that have been found at the site. Of course, it would be great to have a wider sample, but considering that this is such an ancient site, 15% is still quite high. Skull fragments dominate the assemblage of human remains that have been discovered so far, and 10% of them show evidence of defleshing. As stated, we also have evidence of decapitation. Then we have skull modifications on 3 individuals. We can assume that the human skull did have prominence at Göbekli Tepe, and this is also backed up by some of the iconography. On pillar 43, we see a decapitated man at the bottom of the pillar, similar to what we see in the art of the later site of Çatalhöyük. Although debatable, this circular feature supported by the wing of the vulture could also be a human head. On this carving above the vulture, we can also see a detached human head. Archaeologists have also found stone human heads seemingly removed by force from statues, maybe as part of some kind of death ritual. We also find human head sculptures at Karahan Tepe, including this one that's been set into a wall. Although it's hard to see, this statue from Göbekli Tepe that's known as the gift bearer shows somebody holding a human head in their hands. The specific post-mortem cut marks on the skulls of Göbekli Tepe are unique, but skull modifications are also found at Kortik Tepe, which is an older site than Göbekli Tepe, as well as at Jericho and Tel Caramel. Ochre was also found on one fragment at Göbekli Tepe, and we know that ochre was used in burials throughout ancient Anatolia and the Levant. Why this skull was drilled we can only speculate. Maybe it was so the skull could be hung the correct way up, or it could have been a fixing point for a decoration or mask. Maybe it was part of a ritual so somebody could carry the skull. In the pre-pottery Neolithic, drilled skulls are extremely rare, so right now we can't know its meaning with any certainty. Although expanding all the time, the archaeological record for this time period in this part of the world is very much incomplete, but there is enough evidence to show the human skull was significant after death. It's either ancestor veneration, and the skull was decorated in a certain way, likely in homage to the individual, or it could be a way to show off enemies who were caught and killed, a way to ward off future attacks. If the latter, the cut marks could be part of some kind of skeletal mutilation, a post-mortal punishment. These skulls could therefore have very positive or very negative connotations, and right now we simply can't say. Whatever the motivation behind the modified skulls, it is another part of the puzzle for us to consider and to remember as more new discoveries come to light in the coming years. The people of Göbekli Tepe are a true mystery, but with every new discovery, however small, it does tell us something new about humanity in the very distant past. Thank you very much for watching this episode of Ancient Architects. If you enjoyed the video, please subscribe to the channel, please like the video, and please leave a comment below. Thank you very much.